The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, the NERC, will conduct a minor tariff review every 6 months to reflect the economic situation, especially disparity between Naira and other major currencies, specifically the dollar. This is no news now. Well, it's not a new guideline of the industry, but it has raised a lot of eyebrows at this time because of the drop in electricity supply. We have Mr. Shino Sipasi, now partner at Alex, specializing on energy and finance, joining us to share his thoughts on that. Good morning, Mr. Sipasi. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning, Nini. Thank you for inviting me.
Good to have you. So this minor review is actually what is supposed to be done, you know, every 6 months, at least minor. But why is it a big deal now? Why are we talking about it this time around?
So according to the regulation, it is necessary to have that minor review twice in a year. That is what is expected to happen. And the reason for it is that it is the means through which the regulator will ensure that the pricing for electricity is done in such a way that reflects as much as possible the current realities. Now, as to your question, why the review this time around is generating so much comments. That is due to a combination of reasons. The first is that people, without being forewarned, noticed that there has been slight increase in the amount they pay per kilowatt hour of electricity. So when you make your payment and then you check your receipt, you realize that the amount of power you can buy, say with 3,000 naira, the amount you bought in January, you see that there's a slight difference when you look at the amount of kilowatt hour that same 3,000 naira purchased for you, say in March. So that's the reason. So people notice that, but not just that. Another reason why the review is causing a lot of comment is because of the comment by the Minister of Finance while addressing the IMF that electricity subsidy has been completely removed. Now, you will agree with me that subsidy is a very sensitive issue in Nigeria. And people, just by hearing that one subsidy has been removed, that is bound to generate conversation and discussion. So the fact that electricity subsidy has been removed is one of the reasons why this review is attracting so much attention. There's also around that time when the announcement was happening, we had grid collapse and the nation was plunged into almost total darkness for a couple of days. And unfortunately, when that was happening, at the same time, we had fuel scarcity. There was long queues at the pump, and in many filling stations, petrol was being sold for higher than the regulated price. The cost of diesel was hitting the roof, and also the cost of gas, which usually tracks the cost of diesel, also went higher. So it's like everything went high. Aviation price went high. People who have to rely on their generator to generate electricity realize that suddenly they have to pay so much, for electricity. And then on top of this, there was price review, no matter how slight the increase was. So this is the reason for all the sensitivities around this current ordinarily normal price review that the regulator is expected to do.
So before we go deeper into the conversation, is electricity supply back to normal, at least in your area, after the collapse of the grid? Is it back in your area?
Well, in my area, no. And again, it will also depend on what we mean by normal. So when we talk about normal
being before the collapse, normal in this case, I know we're not talking about 24 hours, normal being before the collapse. That's what I mean by normal.
Well, it is not exactly back, and the reason is not, the reason for the almost total blackout that we suffered is not just because of grid collapse. There were a number of things that happened around the same time. Some power plants were undergoing scheduled maintenance. The fact that our hydro plants were not operating at their highest capacity because this is the dry season and there's the need to manage, to do water management. So they rationalize how they generate power. And there's also the issue of the collapse. There's also the issue of vandalization of gas pipelines. Now, those things are not things that are going to be corrected immediately just because the grid is back. The grid is back will not affect gas pipelines that is being vandalized or the inability of gas suppliers to supply gas to the different power plants. Because as at that time, almost about 14 power plants were down out of 26. Out of 24 gas-fired power plants, about 14 of them were down because they had what they call gas constraints. Now, that is not going to be solved at the snap of the finger. I am aware that the Ministry of Power had actually coordinated all the stakeholders, and all of them are talking, and they are looking at a way to actually reasonably restore gas supply. And maybe when that is done and we get back to our usual 5,000 megawatts supply to the grid, we can have a situation where everybody can begin to feel the impact of what we call regular electricity supply in Nigeria. But it is not back to normal, and the reason is not just because of grid collapse, it is also because of myriad of all those other issues that I have mentioned.
All right, so when we backtrack a bit to the minister, we're getting to know on the media that the electricity subsidy has been removed, and all that. Is there a chance that consumers' rights have been infringed upon in any way?
No. No. There are so many factors that go into electricity pricing. And when there are movements in those factors, it could lead to higher prices and it could lead to lower prices. The electricity subsidy that the government used to do are basically an intervention, a temporary intervention step. And when government and the commercial people and the regulators look at the matrices and they think at this point it is not necessary for that or for such intervention to continue, it will simply drop off. It will simply drop off, especially, and they can do that, especially when they know that the impact in electricity tariff will be almost minimal. And really, in this case, the impact that consumers pay in electricity tariff is minimal. In fact, I've seen a lot of consumer groups clamoring for regular electricity because they would rather have this electricity with increased tariff rather than go and be purchasing diesel today at 600, tomorrow at 700. So they would rather pay that electricity tariff anyway.
Well, Mr. Sokas,
so
one of the things.
Anyway.
All right, and then another thing around consumers is how. Well, we'd like to know if Nigeria is still exporting electricity, in the middle of this. That is one thing that also consumers are talking about. But I'm afraid we have to let you go now. I guess that's a conversation for another day, Mr. Shino Sukasi.
All right. Thank you.